Church of Scientology so afraid of?
This is SPTV.
Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that has been in our comments, supporting and digesting things and details and aspects of our story that have been systemically trivialized and watered down. And the reason that that's being brought up is because as long as the mechanics are not understood of what's driving the insanity that took place in our collective childhoods, which is the vantage point that we unfortunately experience in this hotel operation. A lot of people have a lot of different experiences doing things in that hotel. And I don't claim to be the spokesperson of every single person. I can only speak from what happened to me, what I was made to do, what I observed in that hotel, who was doing what, who was where, when. So it's clear that it's important to have these conversations with radical honesty and confront and push back on all the false narratives that have been put in place by the enablers and the people that have been profiting off our pain and the people that have been literally making money while not doing a job. So as I start to unpack all of this dysfunction, I think it's important to give you guys a parallel track, especially those of you who have been reaching out to me about being second generations, third generations, fourth generations, and fifth generations, that you have run into a set of challenges regarding your experience that isn't getting represented. And it's also extremely challenging to know how in the world do you even begin to reconcile the truth and the facts, because it is so horrific to be the recipient of such callous abuse that we keep getting told wasn't abuse, and we keep getting told is what we deserved, and we keep getting told is the type of contracts that we signed while underage. And we are definitely pushing back on that narrative. We are definitely saying no. Explain it to us again, because it is unthinkable that there has been such lack severe of advocacy for, again, the children that are in the burning hotel, that have no way of consenting to all the things that are done there. So I thought it's important to contextualize what it is that I've had to reconcile with and the type of things that I've had to understood in order to be here discussing this information with you guys, now that, you know, I found a way to actually advocate, which is very, very important. So I have consumed various forms of research and videos on YouTube that have allowed me to explain to you some of the aspects of therapy that have been very eye-opening to me in terms of understanding how I got to where I am now and why I am able to advocate and speak to the facts the way I am speaking to the facts. So This is a video that I believe is a very important subject to take on, which is, can I forgive the betrayal? Exploring grief and loss and forgiveness. And the reason that I thought it's important to start with this specific subject, you guys, is because when these second generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation come to us, they need to be given a direction. And I believe this, for any of you who are still struggling under the radar, who don't know what to do, who can't decide, you still feel like you're in between these two things. You don't know if you should go to therapy. You don't know if you should trust that talking point. I just want to point out the more than obvious, but yet has been utterly trivialized war that L. Ron Hubbard took it upon himself to wage against, what was it, psychiatry and the medical profession, right? So just so everyone has a clear understanding of where I stand with this whole hoo-ha museum of psychiatry and all of that misinformation that has been spread widely in those hotels. There's only one concern of why anyone should end up in a therapist. By the end of this video, it's going to become very, very clear to you why L. Ron Hubbard, a man who never had a single theory to make about anything scientific, wanted to destroy the only people that stood in the way of him having his way with all the young generations that were going to be fed to him and his proteges to do whatever it is that they're doing in those hotels. And the reason that therapists in the medical profession is such a threat to this organization has nothing to do with ideology and has nothing to do with any of the fear-mongering tactics that they're using to scare people from seeking outside help. Lastly, every single therapist is a mandated reporter. Scientology's worst nightmare is to have anyone that is going through their hotel experience end up in the hands of anyone who's a mandated reporter. So that's why there's so much crisis management. That's why there's so much false black PR against this medical institution. There's a reason for everything. Nothing was just done willy-nilly. Nothing was done just because we want to do it, just because. So give L. Ron Hubbard and his proteges the credit they deserve in propping up their own way of how they wanted to run their criminal conspiracy and not get caught. So let's get into this video about therapy.
Everybody, my name is Kristin Snowden, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And as Scott said, this is a webinar that just tries to cover all topics that come up in my private practice as I deal with very severe couples issues, addiction, infidelity, uncovering just run-of-the-mill common problems that I see in all humans, all relationships, struggles with setting boundaries, holding boundaries, wondering, is this my trauma showing up or is this my real instincts and intuition? How do I communicate my wants and needs? What are my wants and needs and everything and so forth. So we try to cover all things that we never learn in school. We just learn by trial and error and kind of muddling through this crazy world called engaging with other imperfect human beings. It gets messy. We sometimes need to raise our hand, wave the white flag, ask for help. And that's what one of these free offerings is for. So today's topic is around grief, loss, And the big question, can I ever forgive a betrayal? Can I ever forgive someone hurting me so much? This topic came up because I regularly run workshops. I'm a Brene Brown certified Daring Way facilitator, and I was running groups on Brene Brown's Rising Strong content. And so we talk about how when we're rising strong from a really big face down fall, something really painful, hurtful, embarrassing, shameful, we have to rumble with various topics around criticism, shame, our trauma, living big, as she says. But one topic that really stuck with my workshop group is the topic around rumbling with grief, loss, and forgiveness. Now, as you can imagine, most of my participants are female betrayed partners of sex addicts, porn addicts, or severe infidelity. And these are really, really messy topics that they get really, really stuck on, as you can imagine. So I wanted to devote a webinar on kind of talking about this further, helping you begin the conversation, develop a language for all these really messy, painful emotions that we might be going through when we're walking through grief, loss, and this idea of what forgiveness is. How do I forgive? How do I forgive myself? What do I need to forgive regarding myself? How do I need to forgive another person when they've hurt me so much, when there's been such deep betrayal, and how to move through those emotions? So one of the great quotes that Brene Brown uses in this section is from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and I'm going to start with that. He writes on grief and forgiveness,
So just before she gets onto the quote, you guys, for any who has a question like, Serge, what the hell are you doing having this therapist here reacting to what she's going to share? She talked about betrayal from women and relationships and this and that. It has nothing to do with cults. It has nothing to do with Scientology. She has no experience in that. And one of the things that I would say to that, you guys, is one of the things that trauma taught me is that it doesn't matter what you're calling it. The words, the labels, our therapists having a clear grasp of all of these deranged ideas that had nothing to do with reality isn't necessary in order to heal. In fact, the more you heal, the more you see that everything that took place falls under the same parameters of how Kristin is going to go into the power and balance dynamics going on, and all the various methods that were used to control us. Now, she's talking about adults having problems with adults. Well, as you all know, our problem we experience as kids. So keep that in mind as you're listening to this advice, as you're listening to what it is, so that you can start detangling yourself from what you've been told to think about and start questioning what in the hell was really going on in those hotels and with all of your other relationships that, quite frankly, betrayed you. And that's what's so hard about coming off of this experience, you guys. The betrayal is unthinkable. So let's see what else Kristin has to say.
Forgive is not just to be altruistic. It is the best form of self-interest. It is also a process that does not exclude hatred and anger. These emotions are all a part of being human. You should never hate yourself for hating others who have done horrible things. The depth of your love is shown by the extent of your anger and your hurt. However, when I talk of forgiveness, I mean the belief that you can come out the other side as a better person. a better person than the one being consumed by that anger and hatred and hurt. Remaining in that state locks you in a state of victimhood, making you almost dependent on that perpetrator. If you can find it in yourself to forgive, then you are no longer chained to that perpetrator. You can move on, and you can even help the perpetrator to become a better person too.
So I think that's a very good, wise quote for anybody that's been through what we have been through. So it's important to acknowledge that our anger and our rage is merited due to the level of depravities that everyone around us allowed to take place unchecked. And a lot of the times it becomes hard for second generations to admit to themselves and accept themselves that their very own parents were the ones that were endorsing all the practices that were perpetrated on them. And the practices that the parents supposedly had it in our interest to help us and to do something were everything but that. And the ones that paid the very real price of having those barbarities done to us in the state of our brain that we had at the time, which, come to find out, these people told us that our brain was just gray matter. And they really actually told us how we were way better than animals. And anybody who believes that the brain has anything to do with functioning in the real world is telling you that you are an animal, and you wouldn't want to think of yourself as an animal, would you? Wouldn't you want to be a spirit better? Because a spirit is who you really are. So they continue to disassociate us from our real ages and our bodies. And they effectively gaslit us to walk into their unthinkable abuse traps. So keep that in mind as Kristin goes into how these dynamics actually impact your psychology.
Oh, I'm fast forwarding to the end, but I want you to never hear that when I'm talking about subjects of grief, loss, and forgiveness, the answer is never let go, forget, get over it, because that's just not possible. Your anger, your hurt, your pain is validated. And actually, with all those who research the concepts of grief and loss and moving through forgiveness and moving through all these emotions, the biggest problem is that we aren't comfortable with honing in and focusing in and acknowledging these really messy emotions, the sadness, the deep loss, the deep longing. And that really the answer is that if we could create a culture that is more comfortable with these messy emotions, then we might be able to move through grieving a lot more effectively, a little bit more gracefully, instead of being stuck in this state for a long time. So I just want to bring this back.
So I think it's just important to see how in our journey, how many times we've been told exactly what this therapist is telling us not to do. Let it go. Why are you holding on to this pain? Why are you still stuck on it? It happened so long ago. Move on. And I just want to make something very, very clear for everyone, because I have gotten the comments about, the type of points that we're making the type of points that we have been forced to have to make in this year 2023, after having seen that absolutely nothing has changed in the treatment of how these children are procured and exploited through these hotels. So if you find my tone angry, upset, and pointed, it's because I believe that is the right emotion to have, especially when you took a front row seat at that level of dysfunction, and especially after you have been gaslit time after time after time by the people that purport to want to help. We were told that we were being helped at that hotel. We were not being helped. Again, speaking as a child that was started in these hotel seminars at age 10 by my very own mother, no less. So it's important to contextualize everything, because once the context is understood, you guys, guess what? The mainstream media can do their propaganda. The people in the courts can tell us, oh, you guys have no idea what the hell you're talking about. The IRS can go, oops, this is the way it goes and nothing can be done about nothing. But you know what? All those people can start being held accountable for their individual roles in aiding and abetting exactly what took place in those hotels to every last minor that's been brought in there to do whatever it is that they were having us do. Unthinkable, horrific abuse is what was taking place. Now, yes, go ask the adults. They'll tell you it was therapeutic. They'll tell you they liked it. They tell you they wrote success stories. Well, you know what? I'm here to set the record straight for myself as a child, as a minor. You won't hear me speak of a single problem I've ever had as an adult in any of these conversations. You won't see me complain about someone gaslighting me as an adult. And you better believe it has taken place in my life. You better believe I have been scammed as an adult. Especially after having all that unresolved trauma, I was extremely susceptible to it, and it happened. But you know what? We're not here to discuss that, because you know what? I was an adult and I had to learn how to do adulting, how to make decisions so that I could take control of my own life, so that I could correct my own mistakes. Right? So we're not here to have a pity party about adults making bad choices for themselves, especially when the adults that are making the bad choices, going back to that word, just to quote Monique Yingling, all your decisions have consequences. All your choices have consequences. So shout out to all the parents out there who did bring their kids to this thing. You made the choice. Now, if you want to claim that it was done under fraudulent reasons, write a letter to Monique Yingling and tell her. Perhaps Monique Yingling can re-enlighten you and tell you why you're totally wrong, and she has nothing to do with it. Let's continue with this video.
To, again, recovering from betrayal. I had a client a while back who found out about her partner's infidelity, and the husband was going to move out. So she found herself talking to her sister, just saying, look, this is what's happening. This is what led to us separating. There's infidelity. And she said that her sister just quickly moved into what she described as just very gossipy, wanting to know the details. Oh, how could he do this? Who is this person? Why? Oh my gosh, I can't imagine you guys getting divorced. All I know is the two of you being together. What am I going to do? And the woman, the client telling the story was just kind of like, I was in awe. I'm in this deep pain and suffering and struggle, and I'm going to my sister for listening, compassion, holding space for my deep loss and pain. And all she could do is just kind of make it about herself. Conversely, she called a friend who'd been through some deep suffering and pain as well. And instead, there was this response of just like, oh my gosh, this is devastating. I am so sorry that this is happening to you. How can I help? What do you need me to do? Do you want me to show up? And she just noted the juxtaposition between those two responses. Someone who just was so dysregulated and so upset and turned it towards themselves and just kind of wanted to know superfluous details that weren't necessary at that time.
So going to this aspect of, the superfluous details and making it about themselves, this is a situation that requires holding space, especially to any one of these survivors who were subjected to this level of unthinkable abuse to be perpetrated, all while endorsed by their parents, all while endorsed by the people who worked at the hotel, all while endorsed by these courts of the United States that purport that is literally nothing can be done, separation of church and state. We have no idea what goes on. We cannot even have a single shred of an opinion. Yakety, yakety, yak, as we have heard nonstop for the last 73 years. Well, actually, since 1993, to be precise, because before that, we had this chance for all of this to go away. We had the chance for all of this to end once that unindicted runaway felon died. Right? But attorney Monique Yingling took it upon herself to get herself hired by a 26-year-old that had no idea what the hell he was talking about, that had literally, his own father had normalized all this abuse on him as a child. Because the 26-year-old that Monique was deciding to make her client had an influencer and a person that he was determined to enshrine as a god. Now, he knew what was written in those policies. He knew what that thing was all about. And he thought it was a great idea. And Monique Yingling, still to this date, shocks us with her level of utter glibness and her ease in where she puts her law license to cover up and to defend all manner of indefensible acts. And that is what needs to be juxtaposed.
That moment. And there wasn't a focus on my client who was in the deep pain, deep despair, and deep anguish. While there was this other friend who was able to hold space for just the messiness of how hurt she was, how scared she must be, all the really painful emotions. And Brene Brown would say that that is an example of someone who's done her own work. We cannot hold space for someone else's grief, loss, and pain if we are not also comfortable with doing our own work, facing our own demons, and sitting in the discomfort, the dysregulation, the pain of just like, this is a horrible thing that's happening to my friend, and I can't do a darn thing to fix it. There's nothing. All I can do is just sit here and listen. I hope I don't say the wrong thing. I hope I can help in just the most basic ways, but I can't fix this pain and suffering. But unfortunately, our culture does not do a very good job with teaching us to hold space for those really uncomfortable emotions of grief and loss. We do a lot of platitudes, which that word, I was looking it up because I couldn't remember it today what that word was. I always forget it for some reason. But it's, it's like when someone dies, oh, there's another angel in heaven, or it's when that door closes, a window opens, and there's just kind of these things that we do to skip out on the pain and suffering that someone might be going through, and just kind of you give a platitude. And I was looking up the definition, and it said it's a remark or statement, especially one of moral content, that has been used so often that it lacks interest or thoughtfulness. And I was like, wow, isn't that so interesting that, and so of course you can imagine if it's been used so often, and it's just almost like a scripted response. Like when you say, oh, hey, how are you? And someone just kind of says, oh, fine. It doesn't impact your soul. It doesn't change you. It doesn't help in any way. It's just this platitude. It's just a script that we have to kind of get through our day.
So I just want to contextualize you guys for you. And we're going to do a part 2 of this where we're going to get into the rest of this video, because I really do believe it's that important. But Scientology was nothing but platitudes. The so-called technology, the so-called wanting to deal with the trauma, as if that's even a religious thing to be doing. Again, if somebody wants to explain that to us, how trauma, literal, actual textbook definition of trauma, is something you go and address in some sort of religion, because we know that that is completely not the case. Now that we've had access to real therapists, now that we've had access to real professionals that didn't finish a course in 2 weeks at a hotel to sit down with us and data mine us and use all the data against us, which is, again, L. Ron Hubbard's book, L. Ron Hubbard's certificates, L. Ron Hubbard's auditors are data mining their end users using platitudes to get them to control their emotions. They become puppets. So I want to end off with that thought there. And I want to really have the people that are watching these videos start connecting the dots for yourself. And you can listen to her, you can listen to, there's so much content on the subject of narcissism. There's so much content on the subject of trauma, on betrayal, blindness. And it is true what they say, knowledge is power. Because when you know, it's much harder for these gaslighters to get around you. Because once you know what they're up to, and once you are not having the naivete that you once had as a child exploited, and you actually take control of your life and start asking your own questions and start being able to be what was discussed right here, right? Empowered journey to get to the truth and to get to the facts and to hold those that are harming innocent young souls accountable. Because even us that didn't go to school, that didn't study the law in any type of course room, environment, or university, even us know that the law says there's supposed to be equal treatment for everybody, and that abusing another human being is not a religious belief being manifested in real time. So I'll leave you guys with that. I hope you can start digesting that. I will leave a link to this webinar in the description below, so you can watch it even without my commentary if you like. There's so much to it. But I think it's very important that we start really understanding what these dynamics were from an actual person that has certificates on her wall that actually mean something and that weren't just acquired in a 2-week course. All right, you guys, leave any questions you have, leave any comments you want to make, and let's all join in advocating for every last young, innocent soul that has been roped in under false, fraudulent conditions to sign billion-year contracts in Monique Yingling's hotel chains. I'll see you guys later.